Well, good evening. It's good to have you here again. And for those of you who are joining us virtually, it's good to have you here again as well. Through the magic of technology, we are we are doing well with that. Over the past couple of weeks, we've progressed through a few different processes here in an examination of the prodigal son and the story of the prodigal son. The first week we covered what was the problem being the misconception that God doesn't want what's best for us. And we explored that a bit. The second week we looked at the lie. And the lie was that there's a better life outside of the Father's love and outside of what the Father has in store for us. And then last week we looked at the step. The step being the step from temptation into action that begins every sin. Every sin begins with a decision. That there may be a temptation, but acting on that temptation is what brings us into sin, and that is the step to avoid. Before you can avoid something, you have to understand that it's there and that it actually exists. So I've really enjoyed what we have done over the past 3 weeks, and I'm hoping that you've kept up and maybe done a little bit of the personal study in between our meeting times. And so today we start with session 4. Session 4, we will examine the consequences. And we'll examine this in some depth, and we'll look at some real examples of people who delved very deeply and dealt with some consequences. Last week we looked at what happened to King David as he fell into sin. Now, how was looking at David's life helpful as you examine the past sins and the current temptations that you're facing? Or did it? Hopefully it did. I know that as I looked at this and looked at David's life, I realized that, and that's what we were looking at, was taking that step. I realized that every time that I had allowed myself to take that step and go into a situation where I didn't belong, where what I was doing was improper, that what I was doing was not pleasing to God, that every time I did that there were consequences to it, but mostly that I had made conscious decisions along the way for that. Did any of you experience the same thing?
Yeah, I would say yes. It's very clear looking at this example of David and then comparing it to my own life that there's times where I obviously stopped and made a conscious decision to either follow the narrow path, follow where God wants me, or not.
So as you moved forward, there were times where you actually stopped and consciously made that decision. So often it comes at us kind of sideways, and we're not really prepared to make the decision on the fly. We might be amongst friends. We might be in a situation where we're suddenly under pressure to do things one way or the other. Some people deal with that in work situations where the things that their employer is asking them to do, actually they need to make a split-second decision and either do it or not do it. And sometimes employers asking you to do something that's unethical or wrong or is cheating someone else out of something. There was a good movie I was watching years ago, and for the life of me right now, it escapes me, where a man was coming in. He had been working for a while in a warehouse situation, and he was called in by the boss because his supervisor, the guy's supervisor, had been fired. The guy's supervisor had been fired, and he told him that the position was open. That he knew that he really wanted the position, and he told this man that, well, here's what happened, and here's why the last guy got fired. We're shipping out, and we're shipping out massive quantities of a particular item that we sell, and in order to boost the bottom line, when we send out 500, we really only pack up about 490 or so. And we're doing this on a regular basis, and this is really helping boost the bottom line. It's really helping our company make money, and we'd like to see that. And if there's a way that we can maybe boost that even a little bit more, that'll be what you'll be doing, and that's what we want. That's what we want to accomplish. And so the job's yours. Just want to let you know what we're doing and how we're doing things. And I can't do that. I won't do that. So his supervisor, the boss, sent him back out to the floor. He was very disappointed because he really needed the money. He was in a tight spot. He really wanted to progress, but he knew that he couldn't do it. It was one of those things. It was one of those situations where it had been very easy, especially given the pressures, to say, yeah, I'll go ahead. I can make that happen, because he really needed to move up in this position. Well, he was called back in the next day, and it was a good story. He was called back in the next day, and actually he was given the position. He was given the position because this was a test to see whether or not he would deal honestly with the customers, because in reality, the business really was operating very above board, had the customers' concerns and the clients' concerns very much as a top priority. And they wanted the guy who had gotten fired for doing that, for actually shorting it to make his numbers look better. And the new guy that ended up getting the job got the job because he passed the test. He made the decision in the moment. And so sometimes we see something coming down the street, and there's the decision of whether or not we're going to make the decision, do the wrong thing, make the decision, do the right thing. And sometimes it comes at us really quickly. So, there's a couple different scenarios, but every time we do it, there's a decision involved. Here's what the book says: no one would choose to do something wrong if they knew what lay at the end of their decision. I would say that would have to be true. The prodigal son would have never asked his father for his inheritance if he understood the consequences that awaited him on his journey. Before he requested his inheritance, the far country beamed with promises of a better life. A couple of weeks ago, we watched as the prodigal son took the fateful first step down the path towards sin and rebellion in a distant land. This week, we're going to take a look at what he found waiting for him at the end of the road. This session is about consequences of our sin and rebellion. What was one of the most memorable or humorous punishments you received growing up? Now, there's an interesting question. Mine, I had to struggle with that myself. Humorous? I'm not really sure. Now, I don't know what your punishments were growing up. I'm from a different generation than you. By today's standards, I was probably considered to be a beaten child. No, I wasn't. I was spanked, and I was spanked harshly. But to be fair, my mother was born. I was born very late in life to them, and my mother was born in 1914. My dad was born in 1912. So I was raised by people who very legitimately were my grandparents' age, and they came out of there wasn't a car in my father's hometown when he was born. That's how far back it was. Railroad and horse and buggy, and that's basically what you had. So they had a little different aspects and ideas about what punishing should be, but it really wasn't that far off base for my generation. But I had a paddle that was set aside, and that was my paddle for when I needed my paddle applied. And only one time, this is the humorous part, only one time did I ever get paddled that I didn't deserve it. I knew what the rules were. I knew what I was allowed to do. I knew what I wasn't allowed to do. I had to make decisions along the way. I may have at times made mistakes and gotten paddled for something that I didn't fully understand, but one thing's for sure, I learned the lesson after I got paddled. But only one time did I ever get paddled for something I actually didn't do. And I'm not sure what was going on with Mom at that point. She was in a very bad mood that day, and something I did struck her wrong, and she just turned around, took me home, and put me over the hassock in the middle of the floor, and gave me a spanking, and off to my bedroom I went. Still never understanding what was going on. I look back on it now thinking it was very funny. I didn't think it was so funny then. Now I think it's hilarious because of all the paddlings I should have gotten and didn't. I only got one that I didn't deserve and shouldn't have gotten. So I'd say the balance went pretty well. You have any that you think would be
I mean, I still think. I mean, it's kind of funny just because it's gross, but
okay?
I don't even remember.
Funny and gross. I like that.
But and I think I mentioned it a couple weeks back, but I don't even remember what I said, but I said something that offended my mother. I don't know if it was a bad word or if I said something coarsely back to her.
Okay.
But
So it might have been what you said. It might have been how you said it.
yeah.
But either way, it didn't please Mama.
So, but yeah, she ended up taking hand soap and squirting it on my toothbrush, and I had to go wash my mouth
You
out.
got to
So,
go wash your mouth out with hand soap and a toothbrush.
yes, which is very sudsy.
Yeah, I'll imagine it. I imagine that would be. I imagine that would be.
But honestly, it was probably better than when I had to get a spank or something like that. But
Yeah, I just it's like I said. I knew what the rules were, and when I broke them, I knew what the consequences might be. And sometimes I got caught, and sometimes I didn't. But in the end, I always knew that. I believe my parents knew more often than not when I had done something I wasn't supposed to do, because I think I probably showed it in some way or another. I'm not sure about that sixth sense that parents seem to have, but yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm going to read Luke 15, verses 13 through 16, and we're going to proceed then with our video. But I gotta find it. It's right here. It says, not many days later. Now, this is the young man after he had left. Not many days later. Oh no, as he was leaving. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose, and he began to be in need. So he went and he hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. With that, I want to pray real quick that the rest of our time here is guided, and that what we will take in tonight will be helpful to us in growing closer. So let's go to prayer, and then we'll continue. Father, give thanks for all that you have given us. We give thanks for all the time that you have set aside for us to be in your word, to study the stories of truth that are presented within the word that you give us. We ask that this evening we would be blessed with expanded knowledge, and moreover with a deeper understanding of our relationship with you and what it might be. Father, we ask this in your Son's name. Amen. We're going to turn the video on. For those of you who are joining us virtually, look down on the left-hand side of your screen. You might have to press the button that says Show More. Pause the video now and go ahead and find that, click on it, and rejoin us after you've watched week 4, the consequences video for this week. All right, welcome back. It's I believe the video was especially powerful this week, and therefore we have definitely some questions and some observations and a little further digging to do. So we'll begin with this question: why is it that it often takes us going down our own way before we realize the folly of our actions, and what keeps us from heeding the warnings along the way that we might have?
a lot of times people are, I think it's just human nature where we want to experience it for ourselves, and we don't what you experienced, that's not going to happen to me.
Okay, so it's not going to happen to me. It may have happened to you, may have happened to everybody else that ever did this, but I'm going to go down there and I'm going to do it the right way, and
I'm better than that.
I'm smarter than that. Okay, okay. Um, I think a lot of it still, I think that's very true, but I think a lot of it also hinges on the fact that we tend to believe what we want to believe. We want to believe that this will satisfy us. We want to believe that this will accomplish what we think it will accomplish. We want to think that it's as beautiful and wonderful as we want to imagine that it is. And when other people are telling us, it's not really quite all that. I think an example of that is people in the past. I don't think it's anywhere near as prevalent now. But people in the past, in our history, when we were marching off to war, war was glorified. There was a propaganda campaign that would go right along, and maybe it was necessary. You had to have enough soldiers to go into the field to accomplish what needed to be accomplished to stop the threat that was there. But there was a real propaganda campaigns through almost all of our history, through all wars, perhaps not only our history, but perhaps the history of the world, that war's glory, war will make you a bigger and a better and a more powerful man. You will live out your manhood through all these battles, and this is something that you should be excited to go. And of course, war has never fulfilled on that promise. War is always very, very harsh, very dirty, and very damaging to even those that survive it, even those that walk away from it without a scratch. If they are deeply involved in combat, there's always damage done, and the idea of it being glorious is never fulfilled truly. But it all goes back to our reasons. I looked at it from a different perspective rather than our reasons for why it doesn't. But actually, I looked at it from the perspective of, what if we went at it from the opposite perspective of what actually might lead people to consider their actions ahead of time. And the only thing I came up with, because there's very few real and honest stories that I know of where that was the case, but there are some phrases that I've heard through life. One is that a word to the wise is sufficient. Some people who are really attuned to what is a good idea and what is not a good idea, and what would work and what will not work in their lives. Sometimes a word to the wise is sufficient, and I think the second part of that phrase that we hardly ever hear, but a word to the wise is sufficient, and you can write a book to a fool and it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't matter how much you use. But most of us are not wise enough, because do you remember back, I think, in the very first video where it said one of the problems is our flesh is stupid? Because the only thing our flesh seeks is pleasure. The only thing we want is what feels good. Many years ago, when I was a teenager in the 60s, there was the phrase, if it feels good, do it. And many people at the time lived out that phrase. And if it felt good at the moment, jump into it, enjoy it, do it. And the concept was that the consequences will never really be there. To read on, Jesus wasted no time revealing the consequences of the prodigal's decision. The young man took his father's gift and he squandered it in loose living. The language here communicates that the man took all he was given and threw all his possessions to the wind. He was broke and unfulfilled. Remember that what Matt had called it there in the video was riotous living. I think another word that we might be more familiar with that would describe it was reckless. Would be reckless, because to be reckless means to take actions without considering the consequences. And that literally is what this young man did, and that is what oftentimes gets us into trouble, is when we do not consider the consequences and we move forward regardless. Um, if, has there been a time when you or someone you know have found themselves in a situation similar to that when they pursue into the far country, that they really don't find what they're searching for? I think many of us have. I knew quite a few young men and women in college, especially the first couple of years. There's a reason why many students go off to a 4-year university in the freshman year and come back home and go to work, hopefully in dad's garage or, or their uncle's construction firm, because they're away from home. They're outside of mom and dad's rules and protection. And they basically blow off the first year and find out that they're not going to complete college, at least not with the attitude they have at that time. So that would be where many of the experiences that I've seen out of people, where that happened. I don't know if other people have more and different, but that was my experience. Um,
Yeah, I had a cousin who I don't really know the reasons why, but she had a full scholarship to go play softball,
okay,
and for school out in Montana, and I mean full ride.
had a full ride,
And yeah, after I think she finished the first year,
finished the yeah,
and then just kind of flaked out, and then she was just kind of wandering, in the wilderness, so to speak,
right,
trying to figure out what in the world she was going to do next. And she ended up moving to West Virginia for a while with some family of ours, and hated that, and went to school and
okay.
smoked pot and different things like
It sounds like she went to WVU.
that.
It's my alma mater.
And
That's
and anyway, it's just, and I don't even know if she ever finished her degree, but it was just, she was just seemed so lost
yeah.
for a while until she met a nice guy, and they ended up settling down and had a kid, and they live in Montana now. But
Things kind of worked out, but there was a long period of time when things were very unstable and unsettled for her.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's amazing sometimes that the more we're given, I think that aligns right with the prodigal son story. The more we're given, the more we have to squander. She had a full scholarship for softball. She had a full scholarship for softball. That means 4 years of free college, free education. Probably had her books, her dorms. If she had a full ride, that means everything is covered, and all she has to do is get good grades, good enough to stay in school, and play ball. And it was a lot to give up. But sometimes when you're given so much, you don't appreciate what you've got, and so therefore you take it, especially as a young person, you take it and you just kind of throw it up in the air and let's enjoy it. And you said she completed her first year. They'd never throw you out of school until the end of the first year. Number one, they want the tuition money, and number two, at the first semester, it almost doesn't matter how bad you do the first semester. You're on probation the next semester, and then after probation's over, then they tell you not to come back. But yeah, I had a lot of friends that did something similar. Might not have had the full ride scholarships, but
I think to your point though, it's usually the folks who seem to squander it are the ones who have more to squander. It seems like that.
it might be. It might be. I think for people who don't have as much, for people whose families face more hardship, there's not the opportunity. So maybe we don't see it because they never had the opportunity to go to school in the first place. So we don't see the squandering happening because the opportunity's not there at all. But for some people who have great opportunity in front of them, they just blow it. They throw it away, and I've seen that happen. And sometimes you're right. Sometimes the more prominent, or perhaps the more wealthy the family that the kid comes from. We're talking specifically of college. I've seen that oftentimes where that's the kid that runs the wildest. I've seen that happen. I've seen it happen the other way too. But so, what is it about sin? What is it? Why does sin always leave us feeling impoverished? It is not fulfilling. It's always empty at the end. And, it doesn't even have to be sin. We're going to go back here and we're going to read Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 11. And as I looked at this in preparation, what I realized was there's so much more to this book than just verse 11. In fact, verse 11, I know that he picked it out. I know that it really says something. But to go back, and I believe I'm going to, because I haven't read it for a while, but to go back and reread it with this perspective. Verse 11 says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time, and also he has put eternity in man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end." So what this is saying is that God has given man a yearning, a hunger for something that is not explained in full, is not explained in detail, to where we understand in the end run how we are given this hunger. That's the hunger that the prodigal son had. The prodigal son had a hunger to fulfill himself. He felt an emptiness. He felt a longing. He felt a desire. He felt a hunger of some sort. And as he felt that, he went and he tried to fill it with the only things that he saw that he thought could possibly give him a fulfilled life. Now, if we go back and we look at Ecclesiastes, written, at least we believe, written by King Solomon, and I think that's accurate. I actually do. But throughout it, if we go back to the second chapter, "I said in my heart, come on now, and I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, this is mad. It is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with all my heart to cheer my body with wine. My heart still guided me with wisdom, and how to lay hold of folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under the heaven." He goes on through the entire. Actually, he starts in chapter 1, and it's almost poetic going all the way through, to where he says that everything he's done, everything under the sun that he's accomplished, everything under the sun that he's attempted, all the things that he has seen, all the things he tried to fulfill himself. Understand that this is a man who was, I would compare his wealth, perhaps in his time and in his place, his wealth would be similar to perhaps Bill Gates or what's the Tesla guy? Elon Musk. Yes, Elon Musk. I would say that his wealth would be comparable in his day and time and in his place to people of that caliber. So, what am I going to do with my life? I have this wealth. Also, not only that, there's another thing he has that Bill and Elon do not have. He's a king. He is actually the ruler over all that he sees. So he has this power. He finds power isn't pleasing enough. So he goes and he tries everything that the world has to offer. He tries sex, hundreds of concubines that he has. And I'm sure he lived himself out as a man to the fullest in that regard as to what was available to him. He found it lacking. It didn't fulfill him. He had success. He was the leader of a country, and he was a successful king. He had possessions. Not only did he have possessions, but he built even over and above that. He added on to his palaces. He added on to his gardens. He added on to his vineyards, and all these things that he saw were good works that he did to not only fulfill himself, but also it helped employ people. It helped people that were in his country to have even more. And the people at that time, if they looked as to what pride and prestige we have in our country, they looked to the king, because look at what the king is. Our king is really great. Our king is really powerful. Our king is really wise. Our king is really has all these things at his disposal, unlike our neighboring country next to us whose king has nothing. So we must be great because our king is greater. Had all that. Had fulfilling work to do. Accomplished many things. And all of these things, in the book of Ecclesiastes, all of these things, Solomon went back and said, I've tried it, I've done it, I've succeeded at it all, and I'm still empty for what it has to offer me. It is all vanity. Different translations use different words. It is all vanity. It is all futility. It is all meaningless, meaning that it lacks completeness and it lacks fullness, and it's unsustainable.
That's why we see so many people nowadays, non-Christians, who are always pursuing that next cause, or the next burden that they feel like they have to bear.
Okay. Are you talking about people who are going out there and doing wonderful things? They're going to go out and they're going to go to the soup kitchen. They're going to help people with the soup kitchen. They're going to save the polar bears and save the whales, or help build a new library, or whatever it is they're going to do. They're always on that next quest of what they need to do in order to make.
There's a lot of folks. I mean, there's some that are truly passionate about it and driven. That's
Mm-hmm.
their cause for life. But I think there's a vast majority of people who seem to be a lot more superficial when it comes to those things, and they want to get that immediate pleasure of making a difference in the world.
They want to get the high of being thought of as, being helpful and making a difference. But they jump from one thing to another, to the next, to the next, to the next.
Empty and it's unfulfilling.
Right.
That's not
Right.
the true reason for them being here on this planet.
Yeah. Was it Houses for Humanity? Houses. Habitat for Humanity. Yeah, go out and build houses for people who can't afford houses. And, I've had members of my family participate in that. It's a wonderful thing to do. But they did it a couple of times, and then they quit and they moved on to something else. Why? Was it not a good thing to do? It was a wonderful thing to do. But it was not fulfilling in and of itself. And the reason it's not fulfilling is, as the study shows and as Ecclesiastes shows, the reason it's not fulfilling is it doesn't fill the void that man has, that has to be filled with a relationship with God and an understanding of God. Let me see. Well, I think we're already talking about this. It says, if we all have a void in our lives without Jesus, what are some of the ways that people try to fill this void? Now, this can be good things, wonderful things like you were just mentioning. It can also be a lot of negative things. Some of the things I've seen. People try to fill it with success. People try to fill it with money. People try to fill it with new cars. We're surrounded by water on 3 sides here because we live on a peninsula. People try to fill it with the nicest boat, or the biggest fishing rigs and the biggest houses. Some people try to fill it with drugs and alcohol or sex or even something, quite honestly, a very good thing. Some people try to fill it with expanding their knowledge, going to always going to college, always going to a new class, always working on the next degree. I've known some people like that. They're accumulating degrees and they're accumulating alphabet soup behind their names all of their lives. And while they're in it, it seems very fulfilling. But when they finish that degree, it's never enough. They're going to the next thing. And it's hard to say that that's a bad thing. Education in and of itself is not a bad thing, not in any way, shape, or form. But if that's what you're looking to fulfill and complete your life, it's going to leave a void unless you have God in the center. And then everything else is enhanced. Everything else that we've mentioned, the good things that we've mentioned, everything is enhanced if God is at the center. If God is not at the center, you can try everything in the world and it still isn't quite going to fulfill or leave you fulfilled. Now this wraps up with a question that I think is really good, but very challenging. What are some of the practical ways that we can help people identify their true longing for eternity? I'll just let that one sit there for a minute because that's a big question. What are some of the ways that we can help other people identify what they're truly searching for? I think is another way.
Yeah, it's worded interesting.
It's worded very interesting.
But
Help people identify their true longing for eternity.
yeah, I think basically what they're asking for is, how do we point them back to God who can fill them, make them fulfilled? Um, but I think it's just that. I think being able to talk through it with them and just be able to show them that, I wasn't truly happy until I became saved, and this is why.
Mm-hmm.
Or I see you going down this path, and um, you probably will do it better than I did, but
Right.
it's probably going to trip you up, or it's not going to end well. And maybe even just if just like the dad in the Prodigal Son story, he probably knew it was not going to end well.
Oh, I think he knew very,
Yeah.
very much that it was not going to end well.
But he let his son go, and just hope and prayed that his son would come back one day, which he did in the story.
Right.
And sometimes I think we need to be willing to put ourselves out there like that to friends and family to say, if you need to make this decision, you need to go down that route, then, I'll be praying for you, and I want to support you, and I'll be here,
Right.
when you come back.
So I guess the thing is to maintain, and this is sometimes a very difficult thing to do, is to maintain a relationship with those that are out and are struggling and are trying to find their way, even when they're on the wrong path to trying to do it. Maintain a relationship with them, maintain caring about them, and letting them know that you do, so that when and if and when they are ready to come and say, I've tried a lot of stuff and I'm just not getting it. It just doesn't give me what I need out of life. You have enough relationship built there to where you can offer something else that you have in your life and say, have you considered this? There may be a reason why you're not getting everything you want out of life. And it's not that, and it's not that, accepting Jesus into your life, accepting God into your life and building a relationship there then lets you have all the success you want and all the money you want and all the cars you want. And it's not that. There are some preachers on TV that'll tell you that, but it's not that. It's that the thing that you're really lacking is not these material things at all, that it's something else. And it's really, I think it's really difficult to bring a person to that understanding until if they are led to try to fill their lives with something else, whatever it is, until that fails. And sometimes it takes a long time. We live in a very prosperous country. The prodigal son, at least, I mean, we're not really given a time frame in the story, but the prodigal son, it seems to happen in a very short period of time. It seems as though he goes into the city and he lives this wild, reckless lifestyle, just throwing money around like a drunken sailor, as they say, and doing everything he wants. It seems like within a very short period of time, he's in trouble. We really don't know how long it took. It's not really spelled out. It may have been months, might have been a couple years. I don't know how wealthy the father was, but he gave him his half inheritance. It might have taken a couple years. And then even after that, the son may have managed to get along until this famine hit. Now, real hard times have come. And during real hard times, he has nothing further to sustain him. And maybe if he'd have set a little bit back, maybe if he'd have been, and the reason I say that is that I think some of our people today are doing the same thing, but doing it at a much slower pace. And because we have a good economy, because we have, I mean, at least, at this point, we have a good economy right now. And there are certainly struggles in the middle of what we're in the middle. 2020 has not been a great year, but most people are still making it. And for years, people have made it and done fairly well. And some people even who have struggled by the standards of the rest of the world, we're doing very well. So it may take years for this to play out in an individual's life until they get to a point where they say, I've done so many things. I've accumulated so much. I've had so many things that I wanted in life, and I'm still feeling empty. What is it I'm missing?
For me, as a parent, something that we talk about with our kids from time to time whenever the opportunity arises or we see a good example, but basically pointing out what sinful lifestyle looks like
Mm-hmm.
and why they're not happy and why it's not working for them, and then basically pointing our kids back to Jesus and saying, look, this is why we follow Christ. This is, it's not perfect. It doesn't make life easy. Um, and in some respects, it probably makes it more challenging. But we're happy.
Right.
And that's one of the biggest things that despite all the challenges that we face, my wife and I are very happy. We're very thankful
Yeah.
for what we have and who we are and where we are in life. And reminding our kids that this isn't because of anything we've done. The Lord has blessed us beyond
Right.
exceeding abundantly.
There's a blessing in obedience because you are shielded in some ways. And even when you are not shielded, you know that there's a God that's in control. And giving that understanding to your kids and giving the understanding, like you said, to your children that when there are people who are living sinful lifestyles and you see the damage that it does, being able to point at it, not accusingly, but being to point at it as a teaching moment to say, here's one of the reasons you don't do that. A great sermon that I heard years ago, and I've never heard it preached this way before, and I never heard it preached this way after, was that when we look at the Ten Commandments, and I don't know if I may have already said this at some point because I really like to reference it. When we look at the Ten Commandments and we have the thou shalt nots, so many people look at it. The prodigal son would have looked at it as thou shalt not. Basically, we've got these 10 things. Thou shalt not go out and have any fun. God doesn't want you to be fulfilled. That's the way. Thou shalt not lie. Well, maybe I need to lie in order to get what I want. Thou shalt not steal. Well, if I need something, I want something, and it's there, and nobody notices, and I pick it up. You honor your mother and your father because they want what's best for you. You won't be sexually promiscuous. And the sermon was going through the Old Testament and pointing out that the thou shalt nots are not in order to restrict you from having fun and enjoying life, but thou shalt not do this because it's not good for you. You won't have any gods before me because it's not good for you. You won't lie, you won't cheat, you won't steal, you won't covet. It's not good for you. Not you're not allowed to have any fun, but God wants what's best for you. And I thought that was wonderful. It's one of the things I lean back on occasionally and just remember. And sometimes it comes up like this. So, any other comments? Anything else? Anything from out there? I'm not getting emails, so I'm assuming you're getting as much without any questions as needed and as you can. I encourage you again to do your private study and your through the week and come back next week. I will let you know that we will meet next week, but the week after I am on vacation and we're going to take a week off at that point. So I'll remind us of all of that next week as well. And then we'll resume, and in a few weeks we'll finish up. And summer will be over, and we'll be looking toward fall and seeing what we might do then. And sooner, you say not so fast, I'm not so sure that I'm not ready to get 2020 over as quickly as possible. Thank you very much. Let's pray and we'll go. Father, thank you for the time we have spent together. Thank you for the way you have revealed yourself through your word and through our discussions. We ask that as we leave this place, that you keep us safe, that you keep us under your spell, under your control, under your loving watch in all ways that applies. That you would reveal to us how you would have us live, what you would have us do, the ways that you would have us to resist temptation and to come into a deeper and more understanding relationship with you. Father, we ask for the blessing of that for all of those here, for all of those that join us virtually, for all of those that we encounter during the week. And we ask that you'll bring us back again safely. In Jesus' name, amen.